Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, it's here. Another Shane Wright episode because Shane Wright is with the Kraken. We're going to talk all about that. So lots of exciting things there. Got to talk about how the Kraken performed this past week because it was better. Maybe not still good, but better. So we're going to definitely talk about that. How some of the other young guys have been performing in the lineup. But of course, we've got to start with talking about Queen Anne Beer Hall, our wonderful sponsor for the podcast. Look, RJ, it's a new month. Do we know what the new burger of the month is? And do we trust it because it's April Fool's?
That's right. I don't know if you can trust any news that would come out. I mean, one thing I thought was cool, though, for Easter, they did their third annual Easter keg hunt. Not an Easter egg hunt, Easter keg hunt, where they hid kegs various spots around the city. I mean, how cool is that?
That's pretty dope, actually. I'm like a big fan of that. Especially because, they're big, but also at the same time, if you just kind of stuck it down an alley, would anybody think twice about it? Probably not.
No, I mean, they had one right outside Climate Pledge Arena. I did see that.
That is pretty great. And then you just get to keep a keg? You just get a whole keg of beer if you find it?
I need to look up the rules again. I saw the pictures of them. I'm like, what is going on?
Because that's a hell of a giveaway.
Yeah, no, I mean, they had prizes. I think if you found one of the kegs, you'd win prizes. They gave away, beer, swag, more stuff.
That makes a little bit more sense. I will say this just because it's April 1st. I don't think we're going to be doing any shenanigans on here. I don't think you have anything planned that you haven't told me about. The Shane Wright news is legit because it came out yesterday. So we're not making that up. I did have ESPN ruined my plans April 1st video though, because last year I had done an April 1st video. I was gonna do one this year. Part of it was just I got super busy with all the stuff that we've been working on, but I was planning on, because everybody was talking so much trash about the ESPN loading screen or during the ads on the games with the Home of Live Sports and 30 for 30 library and everything. I was working on a video that was that, but for ECH. So it was home of the Deep Dive podcast and, complete library, post-game lives and all of that kind of stuff. And then they had to go and change it. They had to go and neuter it, RJ, to make it okay for the masses so everybody would stop talking about it. And they ruined my plan.
Okay, now I see why you were so upset about this. I was rejoicing that I didn't have to hear that anymore from ESPN. But yeah, you had a whole thing going, which I didn't realize. So I guess that makes more sense. I remember on our live commentary, right? We were debating this, whether it was good or not that they changed it. That makes more sense to me.
Yeah,
I don't know, but last year your April Fool's video was pretty great.
Yeah, no, I was legit mad about that, and it was gonna be such a great thing. I was just gonna label it the future plans of ECH video and make it an hour and just loop that for an hour with a stream starting soon thing on the bottom. It's going to be great. And then just somewhere in the middle, I was going to put an April Fool's thing and to comment if you saw that thing, just to see who would actually sit there for 40 minutes. Yeah, it was going to be great. I was going to put it at 32-32 for the Kraken. I had so many plans. Oh, well.
I'd feel bad if we had multiple people that commented they saw it sitting there for over half an hour.
There's one or two people in our our dedicated group of followers I felt might do it, but alas,
I have some
not
names
gonna happen.
In mind that I think, yeah.
Yep, not gonna happen. That's all right though. Speaking of plans though, the Kraken presumably have a plan for Shane Wright, RJ.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that, yeah.
We assume. So Shane Wright gets called up yesterday. Now, notable, before we even get into the stuff with Shane Wright, this was the last non-emergency call-up, post-deadline non-emergency call-up that the Kraken had available to them. Do we read anything of significance into that, or are you of the like mind of me, RJ, which is just they'll find an emergency if they do need to call somebody up? It will only be an emergency anyway, so it's fine.
Right. They've had a few emergency call-ups already recently, right? Basically, if you don't have enough players to field a full lineup, whatever, you can call somebody up on an emergency basis. So that's always an option to them. I don't think they're worried about exhausting the regular call-up. Certainly not with 9 games to go. They'll be okay.
Yeah, but it does read out significant because it was Riker Evans, Logan Morrison, Ryan Winterton, and Shane Wright. So it does kind of show the youth movement that Seattle is going for here late in the season, since things are kind of, out of reach for them playoff wise, so to speak. But the Kraken call up Shane Wright, RJ. Let's just start with it. What is the plan? What, in your opinion, what is the plan for this?
So I think the plan for him is to get in at least these 3 games on the road trip, and then maybe the 2 games after that at home. And so the reason I think that's the plan, I think first of all, with this call up, there are a couple of game thresholds that we need to be aware of, and what the effects of those are for not just next year but potentially beyond. So the first thing to look out for is that if Shane Wright plays 3 or more games the rest of the season, he will not be eligible for the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year next year. So that's just something to consider. Now, because according to the eligibility rules, basically how it works is, in this case, so if a player plays in 6 or more games in 2 prior seasons, they're no longer considered a rookie for the purposes of that award. So Shane played 8 last year. He has 3 so far this year. So if he gets to 6, that's it. He's not eligible for the Calder. Personally, I don't think it's that big a deal. I mean, it might be kind of a nice carrot to have for Shane, and really more so, if I think, for the fans next year to have him Calder eligible. But I think he's going to have all the motivation he needs next year as far as just becoming a regular NHLer, making sure that he can develop into a difference maker. I don't care about that a whole lot. So I'd like to see him play at least 3 games, and I think he will. What do you think about that, Dylan?
Yeah, I'm with you, right? Like, obviously, I don't think he was ever going to need it. I think it is something that would be nice for the fans, particularly coming off a year like this, where depending on what kind of moves they're able to make in the off season, maybe that would be something that's slightly more realistic to root for than, say, a playoff berth, even. Just given the way this season's gone. That being said, I've talked about this before. While it would be nice for the fans, the Calder next year belongs to Macklin Celebrini, right? Like, he will be the guy anyway. So, like, unless he sustains some sort of injury next season, it's going to be his regardless. So or he really just falls on his face. So I don't know that the Calder was ever going to be realistic for Shane anyway, especially as somebody who's going to be 2021. There's always a bias towards the younger guys anyway, come voting. I don't think the Calder was ever going to be realistic for Shane. So I have zero problems with it. The ELC, which I think is what you're going to talk about next, is more so the thing that I would be paying attention to.
Right. Unlike the Calder, this next game threshold is quite significant. And that's, of course, talking about Wright's entry-level contract. So the next thing to look out for is if Shane plays 7 or more games the rest of the season. So basically, if he hits that 10-game threshold total, he burns a year of his entry-level contract. So Shane Wright currently on his ELC. For those who kind of don't know how this works, when a player first comes into the league, they sign what's called an entry-level contract. And the cap hit on that contract is really low compared to generally what their market value would be. And so it's important to take advantage of the time that players are on their ELC. And one thing that can happen is if a player is young enough and they don't play enough NHL games, their entry-level contract can slide forward a year, which means that 3-year deal, it just slides again. So you get another year on the end of it. And if the Kraken play Shane Wright for 7 or more games on this call up, he burns a year of that deal. This year counts as one of those entry-level years. And it's very important because from a cap management perspective, you want as many cheap years on that contract as you can get, especially on the far end of it, where you're hoping the Kraken are competing for a playoff spot, Stanley Cup, all those aspirations 3 years down the line. So honestly, letting him burn a whole season just to get, and at this point too, 3 extra games at most, it would be awful cap management, and there's no way the Kraken are going to let that happen. I cannot imagine that they would let that happen. So he will play less than 7 games, I can confidently say, for the rest of the season in the NHL.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know you had already talked about it, but yes, my thinking all along, plan wise, was it makes sense to call him up for this, right? Obviously, he's been playing in Coachella Valley. You can call him up for this California road trip. He doesn't have to necessarily go all the way up to Seattle right away. You have him play against San Jose, LA, Anaheim. Then you bring him back up for the last two home games. Give the home fans something. Let them see Shane Wright. Let him be around the practice facility. Let him be around CPA. Let him experience all that love from the fans. And then, in my opinion, you send him back down Friday the 12th.
Yep. That's right in line with what I was thinking. Because then at that point, if you're the Kraken, you're going on a road trip to Dallas, St. Louis, Winnipeg, Minnesota. It just doesn't make sense. And at that point, what he's played 5 games there. So you have you have one more. Does it make sense to send him just on the road to Dallas before going back to Coachella Valley? I don't think it does. And that's a really tough game against the Stars too. Yeah, I would give him, and you know what? I don't know that they've made their mind up yet. It wouldn't surprise me if they're thinking the 3 games for sure, just that road trip. And then if all goes well, then you bring him in for the homestand. Because I do think it's a bit telling that they didn't call him up for any of these home games on this trip, even though they kind of had the leeway to do so. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's something to that. I think there was something to the fact of, I mean, the team was in a bad place, and you kind of maybe don't want to expose him to that. Although you could say, well, then why bring up Morrison or Winterton? But the expectations around those guys are extremely different.
Stakes aren't as high,
right? So I think that has something to do with it. And then I mean, there is something to, like I said yesterday, it can't be coincidence that you're bringing him up for the start of the California trip. Right, the state that he has been playing in. 2 of these 3 games are taking place, just a couple hours from where he's been all year. I refuse to believe that that's coincidence. I feel like they would play him through those, and then if things aren't going well, you just leave him in Anaheim to take a bus out to Palm Springs. Maybe
he doesn't even have to fly.
Uber, depending on how well he does.
Yeah, that's the real carrot. Hold out, you get to take an Uber back versus a bus.
But that just makes sense to me. That being said, RJ, I don't know that he could realistically play bad enough, or the team could be bad enough that they wouldn't bring him up for those 2 home games, to give him those 2 games in Seattle, to, like I said, get him around the practice facility again, right? Get him in CPA, let the fans see him. I mean, he would have to play pretty bad, in my opinion, for that to happen. I mean,
I agree with half of that. I don't think he would play bad enough for any of that to happen. It's just the team. I mean, if they go out there and somehow lose to San Jose tonight, in a bad way, which again, when those 2 teams meet, you can throw the records out. It can happen, as we have seen in the past, and then say you lose to LA and then somehow find a way to lose to that Ducks. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know that anybody can lose to them. But if that happens, just from a team perspective, and things get negative, then maybe you send him down. But you're right, Dylan. I don't see many avenues where he wouldn't at least be in a position to be okay for that homestand.
Yeah, and that homestand includes another game against the Sharks and Arizona, who, I mean, yes, they could beat this team. We saw it not that long ago, but again, it's not like they're gonna really be like a world beater against you. The only thing that you could think of is well, do you think there's a chance that they do keep his Calder eligibility, RJ, and they play him in San Jose tonight? They scratch him against the Kings because that'll be a tougher game, and then they play him in Anaheim and then send him out to Coachella Valley after that?
Not much of a chance, no. It just doesn't make sense. We just talked about the Calder, why it's not important. And I think also it might even be another thing where it's good to not have that as a talking point or just anything on his shoulders, right? He just focus on one thing. And even if he has a great season next year, right, where it's just not something everyone's talking about, he should be focused on his own role with the team. Not that he's the kind of guy to let his focus slip or anything like that. But yeah, I think in a way, like Francis and the decision makers might want to remove that as a talking point. They might actually prefer that. Yeah,
well, and we know that at least his expectations are to start the season easing into things next year, further down the lineup, then work his way up. He might not start off in a position where he would be immediately competitive for that Calder Trophy anyway. Now, I wonder how much of that is true after recent developments with the Kraken. I could see them maybe, if he has a good camp, just be like, you know what, second line center, let's go. This I think important long term for the team.
Well, I mean, that's been what they've done in general for a while, right? Is just dividing these things up on merit, and they've given players chances to earn their spots. Where if you work hard enough and you show you're ready for a role, it doesn't matter where you start. I mean, you could be Ty Cartier last year starting on the fourth line in the AHL, and if you work hard, you'll get those opportunities. So I think, yeah, the spot will definitely be there for him if he can earn it, but he's got to go out and earn it.
Yeah, so let's talk about how he can go out there and earn it during this stint with the Kraken. I mean, we talked about it. I don't think the expectation needs to be too high. I think this is exactly what this time of year should be used for. We talked about this on the last postgame with Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton. You're using this time where you are out of it. You're not necessarily playing for anything. Losses, in fact, actually help you. So you really don't have to worry about those. And you can use this as an opportunity to get young guys into the lineup, to give them NHL game reps, like actual regular season NHL game reps that are so valuable, so important. They get to see the speed of the game. They get to see the intensity, the physicality, and they get to prepare for it. I think the expectations are, for me anyway, are pretty low on Shane Wright for this group of games, just because it's just about that. It's just about exposing him to the NHL game again, giving him that primer for next year, and anything he does is just kind of gravy on top of that.
Right. I mean, my expectations in that sense, I guess, I'm keeping them low for Shane, and there's not a whole lot that I feel like I need to see. But I do have some things I really would like to see as far as how he's handled by the team. And also he needs to kind of meet that as well. I mean, one of the things, Dylan, that I noticed when he was up here earlier, he was playing a fourth line role. It was very clearly defined fourth line role. And then something that even Ron Francis had mentioned earlier about just taking shorter shifts and really making sure to get off the ice and being kind of rather the safe than sorry in those situations. I'm hoping that we see a different mindset from the team. One, I want to see him play at least a top 9 role, maybe even top 6. I'd be happy with that. And then most importantly, I want to see him given the green light to play more offense and to take longer shifts. And I think that's going to come from coaching. It's going to come from the direction that he's given. But I want to see a different mental approach than when he came up here last time and he was just out there to win a fourth line role. I mean, do you agree with me, Dylan, or would you be happy to kind of see him just take on that depth role and try and win a matchup? Kind of like what we've seen with Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton. Like, they've been playing a fourth line role, but they've gone out and won those matchups and played really well there. Do you want to see that kind of thing from Shane, or are you hoping that he gets, more of a top 6 type role?
I would say you ease him in on the fourth line, or not necessarily fourth line, but third line kind of thing, and then you let him earn more, right? I think that's the mentality, and you put it on him, right? I mean, this is something that they have done all along with Shane Wright, is they put it on him. They start him at the bottom and they let him work his way up. The shorter shifts this season, I felt like were more so coaching decisions rather than, the 8 games he played last year where he was clearly taking himself off the ice, and like every transitional opportunity he was taking himself off the ice. I didn't feel like he played that way this year, right? Like with those 3 games, I felt like that was more so just he was very clearly only there because they needed bodies. They were rewarding him for his Coachella Valley play, and he was getting his $9.48 a night just because that's all they could realistically give him, because they had big expectations. Those were still big games. The Kraken were still trying to work out of their early season slump and get going so that they could push for a playoff spot. So I think that's a little bit different now. I think the minutes will be there. I think he's going to be hungry to grab those minutes. But that's I think also partly why we've seen him handled in Coachella Valley in a certain way, where he's been given more of a leadership opportunity, where he has, and he's really taken it more so than he was given it. And I think the same thing can be, kind of said with some of the ice time stuff, right? That he has to be more so given, but Bausma has really done that down there, right? Coach Dan has given him double shifts pretty frequently in Coachella Valley. So I think it's one of those things, like if he plays and he earns it, he'll get those. But I think they want him to be hungry, and they want him to go out there and earn it, because I think long term that's probably better for him to have that mentality when playing these NHL games.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from on that, but I would still, at least because when we talk about lines, and we'll kind of get into who we'd like to see him play with and what we'd like the lineup to be, excuse me, I would just prefer that he gets that chance right away. But also because it's what he's been doing in Coachella Valley. when you do play in that bottom six role, I think you do have to, in the NHL, you have to kind of develop a different mindset and you have to approach the game a little bit differently. I kind of want to see him just training wheels off from the start in a time where it's low stakes, because next season it's not going to be low stakes.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that because I think normally you're right, but I think based on what we've seen from Ryan Winterton and Logan Morrison, they're not playing like a traditional fourth line. Some of these games, right, they've been the one effective line as far as driving possession. Yes, the matchups have been easier for them, but like Hakstol has not boxed them into fourth line grinder, physical, whatever, right? Like they're kind of that way anyway, right? Both of them are responsible defensively, especially Ryan Winterton. He loves to back check, all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know that the Kraken would realistically do that, just because we haven't really seen Hakstol do that in the past anyway. Right, he's talked about it at times like last year with, bringing in John Hayden for Daniel Sprong, wanting to have that stuff, but he only did that once playoffs were clear and in the picture for the team, right? The entire rest of the time, Hakstol's never used a fourth line like a fourth line traditionally gets used. So I don't know that in this particular example, we have to worry too much about that with Shane Wright. I think, look, again, he needs just reps to figure out realistically how aggressive he should be out there on NHL ice. Because we know he defaults to conservative. We know he defaults to back checking. We know he defaults to playing higher up in the zone, so he makes sure he's the first forward back to help out his defenseman, right? Like, we know that he works that way by default. We need him to understand what he can get away with and that he doesn't need to play so conservative. And I think that he would learn that, but he can only kind of learn that through some reps. We've seen with Logan Morrison, him get power play time. Shane is guaranteed power play time off of this, right? Like, there's no way he's not on one of the power plays, both because of his abilities, but also because nobody on this Kraken team is all that great on power plays anyway, so you might as well bump somebody for him. So I think that's part of it. I think we're going to see all that stuff anyway, but I think just the way they're going to approach it, and if they ease him in against a San Jose and make him go out there and kind of take it and tell him that ahead of time, similar to Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton, they've seized these opportunities. We saw them double shifted in the last 10 minutes of that game against the Stars, when the Kraken needed a comeback, by the way, and they were double shifting that line. I think that the opportunities are there for him to take it, but I think it's really important for them that he goes out there and takes it himself.
Yeah, I understand that you want to earn it. And I mean, I guess there's no better chance than this San Jose game early on, right? Because you look at the last time the Kraken played the Sharks, right? That game in San Jose where it seems like this has happened a couple times to them, where that game was just hanging in the balance for 45, 50 minutes, and nobody would take it. Nobody wanted to go out there and be the first one to score, right? And to take control of the game. And ultimately the Sharks were the team to do it. But I feel like Shane could be the guy, if it turns into a similar game, to maybe shift the balance a little bit.
Right, because that's the way he plays in Coachella Valley, right? That's the way a lot of guys play in Coachella Valley, which is why we've seen what we've seen from Morrison and Winterton, who we'll talk about a little bit more in just a second. But I think that's another reason to start him in a little further down the lineup. If he knows he's only getting 10 minutes, he's going to approach those 10 minutes differently than if he knows he's in a top six role and it's like, okay, let me wait and pick and choose my opportunities then, right? Like, you're just feeding into his already default conservative mindset. I think if he knows he's only getting 7 shifts in a game, he's going to want to go out there and try to make something of those 7 shifts.
I guess. I think on the flip side, you could also say that if he's being in a top 6 role, he has more of that we better score because it's our job to go out and do something and make something out of this, versus if you're, in a fourth line type of role, just staying even is generally sufficient. You let the other guys go out there and score. I know we disagree on this. We'll see. Actually, it's, I think, 10:55 right now as we're recording this. Kraken morning skate starts at 11. So I think, by the time this podcast is over, we might have a better indication of, how Hakstol views it, and depending on line rushes, if we get some.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they threw him into the top 6. I think top 9's for sure, because you want to keep the kid line together as your fourth line.
And also, who's to say which line is first, second, and third at this point?
Aspect of it too. I've never heard anybody think of it that way, right? Like when we hear players talk about the psychology side of things and how they approach games, I've never heard a player be like, coming, especially a young player coming in. Well, they put me on the second line, so my job was to go out there and score, right? Like it was like, oh, it was an honor, and I wanted to support the guys around me, right? That's generally how they talk about it, and so that's why I think. Whereas we've heard them, look, I was only out there for 10 minutes, I had to make the most of it, right? Like that's something we've heard before. So I think that's how athletes tend to approach these opportunities. But who do you think we see him with? Because that is ultimately, part of this discussion is where he's going to play. I think he's on the third line. I think you bump Yanni Gourde to a wing spot. You let Shane play center, because to me that's important. That's more so important than how much ice time he gets, is that he actually plays center during this grouping. So I'd bump Yanni Gourde to a wing spot, and I'd stick. If he's got Yanni Gourde with him, I might give him Oliver Bjorkstrand, just because Bjorkstrand's had such a solid year and he just plays well with everybody.
Yeah, I was thinking Bjorkstrand as a winger for him. And it'll be interesting to see, what do you bump Yanni Gourde to wing? Do you move Jared McCann back to wing? Because now you have another center that you can work with. I think that might even be more likely, that you move Jared McCann to a wing. Maybe have him with, you could go back to the McCann, Beniers, Eberle line, which, they've had for stretches this season. And then you could have, that frees up kind of Bjorkstrand from that wing from where he was playing last game. And then maybe like an Eeli Tolvanen. I know they've looked at him with Matty Beniers, and you kind of had that experiment going, but I do wonder if that might be another guy that you could potentially put with Shane, right? Like a Tolvanen, right, Bjorkstrand line together. I don't know. What do you think about Tolvanen with Shane?
Tolvanen could work with Shane. I feel like their play styles overlap some, so I don't know that like where they like to sit on the ice and stuff kind of overlap. So I don't know how beneficial that would be. Tolvanen can go out there and he can cycle the puck and he can be a forechecker, but he's more so a forechecker on the corners or the half boards rather than say net front. Whereas what part of my thought with Yanni Gourde was, one, it might kickstart Yanni Gourde to play a little bit more like Yanni Gourde after a season where he kind of hasn't. So that would be an added benefit of it. But Yanni Gourde's going to go to the net, right? Like Shane Wright is a player who likes to play in the slot. Having somebody net front's extremely important for that. Right. So then maybe Jaden Schwartz should be on his wing. Actually,
I was thinking Schwartz as I was looking at this too.
Yeah. But Shane Wright needs somebody who's going to be net front for screens, for tips, just to kind of create chaos, to suck defenders down low, force them to play down closer to the crease so that it opens up the slot for Shane Wright. Right. That's what he's had all year in Coachella Valley. That's where he thrives. That's where he thrived in junior even. So I feel like he needs somebody who can kind of go net front. And I felt like if you move Yanni Gourde to the wing, it might kind of wake him up a little and he'll start playing that way again, and you kind of get that added benefit too. But yeah, you could easily put him out there. Heck, you could put him out there if you're going to move McCann over to wing. You could have him out there with McCann and Jaden Schwartz.
Or I guess you could do McCann and Schwartz. What do you think about this? This would be the more kind of 1-to-1 thing where you're not messing with too many lines, but you move McCann to wing, and then because right now it's Schwartz, McCann, Eberle, and that was kind of the leftovers line,
right?
That honestly didn't do very well last game. We saw their numbers were pretty bad. You move McCann back out to the wing. What do you think of the idea of just having Shane center that line with Schwartz and Eberle? Because I think we're agreed the two things you need somebody who can go net front.
Yep.
Because Shane likes to go to the slot, and I think you need somebody who can distribute to him, who can find him in the slot, who's got that good vision. And the number one guy I think of is Bjorkstrand, but the number two guy I would think of is Eberle.
I might throw Berkey in there, but just given Berkey's overall struggles this year, maybe not right now.
I think you take Berkey, he likes to distribute, I think, from different areas, I guess. Then I think I always think of Bjorkstrand and Eberle being able to kind of work the corners and work behind the net.
Yes.
And you look at Shane Wright, I think it was kind of how his first NHL goal, right?
Yeah.
Developed, where it was kind of that pass out to the slot. I want to see someone who can kind of work behind the net and maybe hit him in the slot if Shane can get loose there. And I think Bjorkstrand, and I think Eberle, though, because he's been good with some of those plays as well.
Eberle's good passing in and around the net and behind the net. You're right, and yes, that is how we saw the prominent NHL scoring chances that he's had. I think, though, that he is long-term, Berkey makes a lot of sense with Shane Wright, because that's the kind of player that Berkey's been waiting for, is somebody to drive down the middle lane there and that he can get the puck to from the side, right, from the half board, right? Like that's what Berkey's been looking for all year, and he sends these passes and just nobody's really there for him. So I do think long term, Berkey, like this might be the first center that actually makes sense for Andre Burakovsky that the Kraken have ever had.
Yeah, you know what? I think that might be the case.
Or at least he's the closest thing to that guy that the Kraken have ever had.
I mean, it would be the ultimate kind of motivation, wake up kind of situation for Yanni Gourde and Andre Burakovsky if you put him on Shane's wings.
Yeah, it would.
Like, all right, guys, I know this hasn't been fun the last month or so. It's it hasn't been the results you've wanted or anything. But look here, here's this great new toy that you get to work with, right?
Yeah.
And I think that could kind of wake both of them up.
And the other thing to it too is I do feel like if you have him out there with a Yanni Gourde or a Jared McCann, do you think then that they're able to tell him, look, they're going to handle the defense. We want you to just focus on offense, right? And he's a little bit more likely to actually internalize that because he understands that he's got Yanni Gourde to his left or whatever, right? Or Jared McCann, who we know can play well defensively, versus if he is out there with an Eberle and a Jaden Schwartz, he might not step up in as many opportunities because he's like, okay, they're veteran guys. They're going to be kind of down there. Let me play higher up in the zone and make sure I can be back to help out defensively. I don't know. He might, like I said, he might default to this anyway, just because he always
I was going to say, in either situation, right? I don't know that you can get that mindset out of his head at this point. I think that's, kind of wishful thinking to think.
Right,
yeah.
But that's what this opportunity is here for, right? Like, because to me, that's the number one thing you want out of the 5 games or however many games he's going to play, is just to get him comfortable with being aggressive at the NHL level. You were able to do that at the AHL level this year, right? He wasn't that way last season, even through the playoff run. This year, about a month in, it clicked for him, and he's gotten a lot more aggressive in Coachella Valley, right? And he's figured out a way to play aggressive and have that defense. We haven't seen that at the NHL level for him. It's possible that he's just that guy now, and he's going to port that over to the NHL right away. But I feel like he probably won't, just because most guys don't. So I think like these 5 games are just to get him used to the NHL again and let him understand that he can just play that way at the NHL and that it will work because he is talented, right? And he is a big guy. He can withstand the physicality. He can go to the slot at the NHL level, and that he'll have guys there that can support him doing that. Because if he doesn't feel supported doing that, he's not going to do it.
Yeah, he needs to feel supported. That's for sure. I wonder about the coaching message too. Like if you're, I mean, maybe it's just what you just said, but like if you're Dave Haxtell, kind of what are you telling him? I almost want to, I'm tempted to just say something like, if you get caught low and you get, burned in transition the other way, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
We don't care.
We don't care. We're not fighting for a playoff spot. You kind of have to be able to make your mistakes, but it's better to be on that side of things than to stay up too high.
Well, and this goes to a larger thing, and obviously we don't know definitively because we're never around for these meetings and the messaging and what it is that Dave Haxtell talks to this team. But like, I feel like that message should have come across to everybody like a month ago, right? When it was, look, we defend well enough. We're getting great goaltending. Somebody, for the love of God, play a little risky offensively, and let's see if we can't finish above, bottom 4 in goals for this year. Right? Like I feel like
maybe it should have, but it hasn't. You look at the results.
Well, but that's concerning for me with the Shane Wright thing, is because as much as we're saying stuff like that, I don't think anybody in that room is going to say that to him, coach or player.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know who would at this point.
Like who in that locker room is going to be like, I know the coach just said this, but listen, just go out there and play this way. You'll be fine. We'll take care of you.
That's what you'd like to see from a Jordan Eberle, but I don't see that happening.
I don't either. So that is something that concerns me a little bit. If he's not going to be insulated with other young guys, do you think there's a possibility that they just slot him in with Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton?
I mean, you'd bump Morrison to wing then?
Yeah.
Maybe. I think they're still going to keep the kid line together because of how well it's been working. And also,
well,
I know we talked about this.
Somebody's got to come out of the lineup for him, right? Like, we haven't even talked about who's getting scratched for him.
Oh, you're right. Well, see, that makes it even more interesting because Hackstall has shown that he will not scratch regulars. He doesn't
Right.
scratch regulars. He doesn't scratch veterans. Like, I'd take Tanev out of the lineup. Like,
Yeah,
I'd
but he
pull
never
Tanev
will.
because he just doesn't fit here. He never will. Hackstall will never do it. So, I maybe it is Cartier, and then, or I don't know what, because it wouldn't be Morrison or Winterton, because
They're
while
playing
they're
too
up
well.
here, you want them playing games. They're playing
Yeah.
too well. Ty Cartier doesn't deserve it.
No, but I think he's just the guy, right? Like he's
Yeah.
just you're the guy, you're the young guy. You're the least established, so this is, part of your spot on the team is you're the guy who gets scratched. Like I'm worried that might be the case.
Yeah, as I look at it, yeah, I'm worried about that too, because I don't see who else it would be.
No,
Everybody else just seems like just totally safe because Hackstall doesn't fetch regulars.
right, because he doesn't like to send messages in that way, right? Even the Morrison and the Winterton call up weren't a message sent, right? Like they were very clear about that.
Yeah, it
Right.
wasn't a message sent, and all the scratches are guys who are not under contract
Uh-huh.
for next year.
Right. So like I think it's probably going to be Ty Cartier, in which case it opens up the opportunity for Shane to just play with the other two guys.
Yeah, well, although as easy as it would be to just throw Tanev down there, so it's not
You could do
for
that
sure
too,
that
yes.
would happen. But then that's still then too much of a. I know we just argued about it. Too much of a fourth line role for my taste,
Mhm.
and then maybe he's got to go earn something more. But I would like to see him with some vets instead of Morrison and Winterton.
We will find out soon, and I just keep refreshing Twitter, and let's see if we can get those lineups.
That's what I've been
before the
doing
end of the podcast. It'll be a lot of fun to kind of see it there. Let's quickly talk about Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton though, just because we haven't talked about them. And the couple games that they've been able to get in here on the podcast yet. And look, we've obviously talked about it already. You could tell based on the tone that we've used to talk about them, they're playing really well, right? This was exactly what the team needed. Obviously, playing the Ducks didn't hurt, and we're going to get to the kind of overall team problems and whether or not they're solved in a little bit. But having the energy of guys like Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton was really something this team needed, because this team, we talked about it, the effort level was very low, lowest we'd ever seen from this team. The energy level was super low. And as much as it wasn't supposed to be a message to everybody, I do feel like a message was received by some people, right? Some veterans on this team, because yes, you almost have to throw the Ducks games out because the Ducks are so bad. And in one of those games, they gave you 10 power plays. So how much are you really going to judge from that game? So you have to throw those out. But in the game against the Stars, the most recent game, based on the time that we're recording this podcast, yes, the team still struggled. Yes, the team couldn't score at all. But the rest of the team had energy and life again. And I don't necessarily think that was just because you just won some games against the Ducks. Right? Like, I think that's because you have guys in this lineup that are playing strong, that Hackstall is double shifting when they're playing strong, right? Like, he is getting them out there as much as possible. I think they did send a message, right? You'd said maybe the message wasn't sent, but the message was received. And I do feel like they've been able to do that with their call-up.
Yeah, and I think it's consistent with maybe the couple games of lag even, because I don't know that the message initially was received because the message wasn't intentionally sent, right?
Yeah.
With these guys coming up. But after they played really well for a couple games and after Hackstall showed he was willing to give them more opportunity, then I think the guys really internalized that, and you saw a little bit more jump against Dallas. Because, I mean, you have like Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton getting up to, 12, 13, 14 minutes of ice time, especially in Morrison's case, because he was getting power play time right away.
Yep.
I mean, that is huge, especially when the Ducks are going to put you on the power play 10 times, 11 times in a game.
Yeah.
But, Hackstall wasn't afraid to put those guys in those positions. And I think that's the kind of thing that can spark the rest of the team.
It is. It is. I'm super pumped about that. I mean, that's a message sent, right? Like maybe the call-up's not a message sent, but you throw Logan Morrison on the power play right away and you stick with him there. That's got to be a message sent to some guys, right? Because a guy will feel losing out on power play time.
Right. That's a spot there are definitely other players on the team that could have been in that spot otherwise, that would have been in that spot otherwise. And all of a sudden, when you're not getting power play time, I mean, that can be a pretty big motivator.
Yeah, you feel that. So I do feel like that was part of it. Let's talk about Logan Morrison. The thing I love about Logan Morrison, RJ, is he's just going for it, right? Puck gets on his stick, he's sending it to the net, right? Yes, he'll make some passes when it makes sense to, but he has been so aggressive shooting the puck. He's averaging 2 shots on goal a game, which if he had done that over the course of a full season, RJ, would put him 3rd or 4th on this team in shots, right? Like we've talked about this. I've talked about this with Matty Beniers. I've talked about this with some other guys. Just start shooting more, right? This team can't score. Just start shooting the puck more. At some point, they will go in. Things happen. You get deflections. You get bounces off of a defender. You get a goalie who just, for whatever reasons, couldn't see it at that moment, right? Good things happen when you shoot the puck. I think his mentality of just kind of sending it when he has the opportunity to is exactly the kind of identity that this team needs to pick up a little from.
Yeah, as was quoted from Hackstall a while ago this season, shoot the bleeping puck.
Yeah.
And that's something that Logan Morrison has certainly internalized. I've been impressed with that part of his game. I mean, the other thing, too, the little things he does really well. And even something like faceoffs where you wouldn't expect a younger player to do well. You look at that Dallas game. And the Kraken were losing D-zone draws left and right. And you knew it was going to come back to bite them at some point. It ended up doing so as Dallas scores their first and second goals right off of the D-zone draw, offensive zone draw wins. But Morrison won a few really clutch defensive zone faceoffs. It seemed like whenever I noticed him back there, because that's a dangerous spot. I'm like, oh no, Stars have put a top line out there. Morrison's there taking a faceoff in his own zone. He's the rookie. This could get really bad. A few times like, oh wow, he won it. Oh, good for them. They got the zone exit. Look at that. So I've just been impressed by his game all around.
Yeah, he's sitting at 52.6% faceoff percentage wise, which on this
gotta be
team,
best on the team, right?
It's not quite. It's 0.1 behind Belmar. When Belmar was playing, Jaden Schwartz is taken, at 56.5%, and it's below Shane Wright. Shane Wright was at 72.7% earlier this year when he was with the team. Let's not forget. But yeah, no, he has done a great job all the way around. It is only because he plays for the Kraken during their season 3 of existence that he doesn't have a goal, right? The amount of insanely good opportunities he has generated, he's been there for, he has sent on the net just for something dumb and stupid to happen, and it means that it's not a goal. That's just playing for this team this season. That's just indicative of everybody.
Yep. And I sort by shots on goal on the team, right? And everybody above him who has equal or more shots than he does has a goal. So it's coming for him.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely coming. He's put himself in way too many prime scoring opportunities for it not to happen at some point. And then with Ryan Winterton, maybe slightly different. The offensive opportunities haven't been as plentiful during this call-up for him as I felt like earlier this year when we saw him. But his defensive game, RJ, and really it's how aggressive he backchecks through the neutral zone is really, really fun to watch. Because we have that from some guys on this team, but they're all centers. To have it from a winger, to have a winger who's willing to go below the goal line of the defensive zone to help out the defenseman and then still be part of the rush going up the ice, that's just something that this team hasn't really ever had. And I think it's something that, it's making me, as I'm watching it, go, if the Kraken really do want a youth movement next year, this guy can be penciled in really anywhere in this Kraken lineup.
Yeah, and that he's going to be responsible in that way. And I think that could be a result of a guy. Didn't he play some center in junior?
He did. Yeah, he was a center.
Yeah, he basically was a center. Yeah, I remember him being drafted. I know everybody's drafted to center, but I seem to recall him playing center in junior. So you have that instinct that comes with it as well to kind of know where you should be and be responsible defensively. Yeah, he hasn't gotten as much opportunity. I think he maxed out in that first game against the Ducks at about 11 minutes of ice time, 8 minutes the next game, 10 minutes the next game. But the 8 minutes is a result of just not being on the power play when your team spent a third of the game on the power play. But still, he's playing more of a true fourth line kind of role, but he's helping win those matchups. And I think he's been a really good as a kind of a complementary player to Logan Morrison, who, like you said, is just going for it. Winterton is hanging back a little bit more, but allowing Morrison to do what he's doing. Right.
And that's partly what they've done in Coachella Valley. Like when Ryan Winterton's been with Shane Wright, he has been the piece that has allowed Shane Wright to then get more aggressive because Ryan Winterton has been there to pick up the defensive slack for him, right? Like that is something we have seen at Coachella Valley at that level. So maybe that's partly why I wanted to see him with a defensive winger, Shane Wright, because we do know that it can open things up for him. But Ryan Winterton, just looking at it, I don't think did he get PK time in that last game, in the Stars game? I don't remember if he did during the Adam Larson stretch. But he's somebody who gets a lot of PK work in Coachella Valley. He is built for it. I think he's that kind of Tanev replacement guy that they're going to have on the PK who can get up the ice quick and try to generate shorthanded chances. I think there's just been a lot of good stuff from Ryan Winterton, and we know he has the offensive side to his game. When put in a position to use it, he's not really in that spot right now, but we know he's got that there. I've just been impressed by his maturity, by the way he's helped out defensively. He's just picked up a lot of slack that the Kraken defensemen kind of give, right? A lot of the issues that they have, he's been the first kind of, certainly winger, but in some cases forward, to just go ahead and, like I said, drop below the goal line. Go down there, really help them out. Sit net front and get physical with somebody. Why not? Right? Like, if they're not going to, somebody's got to do it. He's the first guy to kind of have that mentality on this team. I'm worried about long-term that getting coached out of him maybe, but I like that aspect of him, and it's really made me think he might really have a legit shot at this lineup next year if he has a good camp in preseason, whereas before I would have said, it's kind of Shane Wright, and then he would be the guy really sent back down to Coachella Valley. Now I'm like, no, he might be able just to start his NHL career next season.
Right. I mean, last week on the podcast, I advocated for a pretty extensive youth movement as far as those bottom 6 spots. And like, you could see a guy like Ryan Winterton, if you were to move a Brandon Tanev, who I think could do the same job, or a similar job just as well for a lot cheaper, and a guy who's maybe a little bit more motivated too. So, I mean, this is just selling it for me even more that I'd like to see him get that chance.
Yep, definitely. So they're both playing really well. Let's talk about the team as a whole, though, right?
Well, actually, Dylan, real quick, because we were talking about it recently, we know line rush is where Shane Wright is going to be, it looks like. All right, so via Jeff Baker, who's at the Kraken's morning skate in San Jose, this is one of the ones that I maybe suggested. Shane Wright is centering a line with Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we kind of talked about that already, but it seems like Hackstall's chosen to, I would imagine, move Jared McCann back to wing, just slot Shane in between Schwartz and Eberle, kind of get rid of that leftovers line from last game, and we'll see how it goes.
I mean, it's what Hackstall.
You disappointed?
I am.
I see your face.
Look, I don't. Did I say it? I don't know. I meant to say it, but I was thinking that you're more likely to be right, but I still don't agree with it. Right? Like
that's fair.
You're insulating him with the veterans and like the safest veterans possible. Right? I like the Jaden Schwartz thing because he helps him, but he's going to be the net front guy. We talked about that. But I don't know. I want you to put him in a spot where he has to go out there and be hungry, because that's what worked for him in Coachella Valley. Right? They put him on a spot where he had to go out there and work his way up the lineup. He had to go out there and play aggressive to earn the ice time, and he did, and it worked. And I don't know why you wouldn't take that same approach here when, again, these games are meaningless for you. Who cares? Just go, put him in the best spot long-term for his development. Similar to what they're doing with Maddie right now, right? Like they're changing up the lines for Maddie, but it's to kind of force a different play style out of Maddie so that he can kind of get comfortable with that before next year when presumably they want that from him. I don't know why you wouldn't do that with Shane here. Like, take the kid gloves off a little and treat him like an adult.
Well, I think that's what they're doing by giving him what should be a top 6 role on this line.
Well,
as opposed to giving him kind of more
top 6 in the sense that the top 3 lines all play.
Nobody's going to play. Yeah, nobody's going to play more than 17, 18 minutes. But they're giving him a spot, like, as opposed to what we were talking about with, if you put him with Morrison and Winterton, right? That line's not getting more than 10, 12 minutes.
Right.
He's playing more at least this way.
Right. But if he's gonna just play conservative, I don't know how it's helpful really long term for him.
Yeah, well, I don't know that he will. I think he's going to be hungry enough as it is. I mean,
I want him to. Hopefully he does.
And honestly, look, if you're looking at a player like this getting this opportunity, because playing in the certainly top 9, right? You would hope, and I think with Shane, you almost know for sure, right? He's going to be hungry enough as it is. Like, you'd hope.
You would hope. We would have said that the last 2 times, and it hasn't been the case, right?
Yeah, but because he was playing in a clear 4th line role.
Maybe. I don't know.
We're gonna learn a lot tonight. I'm just so excited to watch the game tonight.
We're gonna learn a lot tonight. It comes down to this: did he really change in Coachella Valley, or did he change for Coachella Valley? right? Because that's what we're essentially arguing here, right? I think he changed for Coachella Valley based on the situation that they put him on. I would love to see him bring that up. I think there is a chance that he brings that up with him. But until I see it, I'm not going to necessarily believe it, because watching him going from Kingston to Windsor, watching him in the NHL last year, watching him go to Coachella Valley last season, watching him through Coachella Valley's playoffs, watching him at the beginning of this year, he has never started off somewhere and not played conservative and safe. That is who he is. So unless he has legitimately changed, I have to go based on that pattern of behavior.
That's fair, but I can't, just watching him in Coachella Valley, he looks like a different guy. And yeah, we don't know if he changed for Coachella Valley or changed
right. And that's the only
at least until the Kraken can coach it out of him. I don't know.
Well,
look, given the recent call-ups that we've seen, whether it was Evans coming straight up or Morrison or Winterton, like all those guys have been legit ready to go, and then it seems like they're here long enough, and things start to hit the ground again, and we can. That's a longer conversation about whether the coaching staff. Yeah.
Like I said, my whole argument for putting him on the fourth line was just that we know that works to get him aggressive. So that's the only reason I've been saying it, right? Like, you start him on the fourth line because we know that'll get him to get up and go. But again, we haven't been around. It's not like we've talked with him. We have no idea what mindset he's in. He could be in world beater Shane mode right now, and he's totally pumped for this, and he wants to go out there and prove it, in which case, yes, stick him higher up in the line. Freaking put him between Tolvanen and Bjorkstrand on the first line. Give him 20 minutes. I don't care, right? Like, you might as well, if he's going to be in that mindset, if he's going to play that way, you might as well long term, because there's, send a wake up call to Maddie, right? After this season. Like, you could really do a lot if he's in that mindset. I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I heavy on the cautious.
Yeah, I cautiously optimistic. I think that's a fair spot to be, and I think we'll find out a lot tonight about where his head is at.
Definitely. Let's talk about the team and kind of where their head is at. They're able to get some wins. Been a long time since we've said the Kraken have won some games on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Caveat: they were against the Ducks. Ducks were awful in those games. The first game, they were just truly bad. Like, I haven't seen an NHL team play as bad as the Ducks did in that one in a very long time. Second game turned into the penalty fiasco. They gave the Kraken a million opportunities to come back into that game because, I think we forget somewhat. Start of the third period, Kraken enter it up 1-0, immediately give up 2 shorthanded goals on the same power play, right? And I legit, RJ, if the Zegras stuff doesn't happen and the Ducks don't take, I think, 7 more penalties in that period, I don't think the Kraken win that game. I don't think they score a goal to tie that game in the rest of that third period after that.
No, I don't think so either. If that's just played at even strength, I don't think they do. I think with how much they've struggled to score, but the Ducks just seemed completely intent on throwing that game away. And especially watching those 2 games in a row, same building, same opponent, just being there for them. I'm not convinced that the Ducks can beat any team right now with the way that they're playing. And so, the kind of the joke question, right? Well, it's against the Ducks, so does it count? I think that actually is worth asking a little bit when we talk about the team's effort and response to Hackstall kind of laying down the gauntlet there after the Montreal game.
I already said it earlier, right? I don't think they count. I think you throw those games out. They mean nothing. And sure enough, the next game you play Dallas. You play a lot better than you have in weeks, but you still lost 3-0. You still couldn't get on the board. And I think at the end of the day, that still shows that this is the key problem with this team, is that they can't score. Right? Forget about the fact that nobody can finish. Nobody can set up an opportunity. Nobody can manufacture an opportunity. Nobody can create a goal in any way on this team, whether it's special teams, 5-on-5, shorthanded, no matter what it is, right? Like, the main problem for this team still exists, which is they don't know how to create a goal.
Yeah, how to manufacture a goal in the way. And one of the things we liked about their play, especially on the power play in the Ducks game, like, you look at that goal where Eberle just banked it in off of Schwartz, that at least they did some of the right things to go to the net and manufacture a goal. Yeah. You can't get away with that against most teams because they'll just stop you from getting to those areas. You have to kind of work for it more than that. But yeah, the Kraken can't just they can't do the things they need to do to manufacture get to goal, get inside, get shots to the net, follow those rebounds. It's can be a fairly simple formula, but they've shown this season they either don't have the talent to get it done to convert, or they just don't have the will to get to those areas.
Right. And I understand a team not wanting to pivot totally to that too soon, because it's not necessarily a sustainable style of play, right? Like, it's a brutal style of play. It takes a lot out of you. It's not something you want to do over the course of a full season. But there have been many times, and this is obviously the most extreme stretch of time, where the Kraken have struggled to score. And I've watched a lot of good teams, a lot of Stanley Cup winning teams, RJ, where when they go through their slumps trying to score to help kind of wake up the guys, they make them play that way, right? Because that's how you get out of the streak. That's how you keep a losing streak from going 8 games, right? It's because you go out there and you grind one game out, you win it 1-0, you win it 2-1, and then the momentum and everything and the energy in the building changes, and you're able to go back to your traditional style of play and get out of it. And I don't know why we're not seeing the Kraken do that, other than they know these games don't really mean anything, and they're now pivoting to instead focus on the kids. And you don't want to call up all the kids and then make them go out there and grind out low-scoring 2-1 games, right? So I guess that would be the reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, though, is that these games just don't matter anymore. And I think that was part of the problem after the Vegas game, where the season basically ends there. You lose in overtime. And the guys admitted as much, right? That there was a lot of disappointment after that game and kind of realizing they fell out of the playoff race. And so they kind of had to find some motivation still. I still don't think there's a whole lot of that left, though. There was some motivation to end the losing streak so that that number doesn't just pile up. But after even the effort in the 2 games against the Ducks, you play any other team, I think you lose those games. So I still don't think the effort is fully back.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally with you. Like I said, but that's a reason then to go out there and do that, right? If you're the coaching staff, lay into everybody and make them play a hard game. And it's always been used as the message of, look, this is how you're going to win if you can't find a way to win the other way. Right. Like, and I think just given the amount of talk around this team, because again, we reached levels during that losing streak and during that stretch of time that we had not reached even during the December losing streak, right? Where we were talking, okay, it's not just Coach Hack on the hot seat because the team isn't playing well. It's maybe Coach Hack on the hot seat because has he actually lost the locker room this time, right? It's, do these guys even really want to be playing? Like, where's the motivation? Where's the energy? They're gone past, oh, we're doing all the right things and it's just not working, to just, I don't know, whatever, right? It's gotten to the point where they're seen laughing, walking back to the locker room after blowing a game, right? Like, that's where we were at. And so that's why I'm surprised we didn't see something. Maybe they just knew they had the Ducks games coming up and they figured that was enough. But even just winning,
and it turns out it was.
Yes, yeah. But even just winning games in front of a home crowd that is starting to show up less and less, right? Like, at some point.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think you may have hit on something too, and that's why I'm really curious going into this road trip how the Kraken look, because part of the motivation, Hackstall said, we need to step back and put things in perspective and realize that we need to find motivation from 2 areas: playing for each other, of course, playing for your teammates because you have pride. But 2, the fans, the home fans. And he mentioned that multiple times as a big motivator. That's off the board now. They're on the road. They don't have that to worry about. Not even so much wanting to do right by the fans. I feel like that's not as big a motivator as people might lead you to believe. I think it's more just not wanting to get embarrassed in front of the home fans. But now you're on the road. You don't have that. So I do wonder how much of a factor that is, and if they can still muster up some kind of effort given that they're on the road.
Yeah, I was gonna say that big Hackstall talk about the fans, that was fairly pre-prepared, given it wasn't relevant at all to the question he was asked. Coincidence? Day after this podcast came out, and that's basically all I talked about. Just saying. Because
you never know who's listening to this,
right? Well, we've talked about that stuff in the past, but it's because it's true, right? Like, some teams do take that into account. Right? They really do take the fans thing into account because, again, like I said last week, that's who allows you to have the job, right? Like, you have to make sure the fans are happy, and you have to make sure the fans are coming, because if fans are not spending their disposable income, you don't exist. And I think that there is an element to thinking that way, and I do know of franchises that think that way, right? The Ducks think that way, right? Yeah, they're going through the problems right now because they're tanking and they're rebuilding, but that's very much the way that organization thinks, right? Fans first, because without the fans, none of us have jobs, right? Like, and I think that can be healthy, and I think that was something that the Kraken were trying to work in to everything, because I think for the first time in their existence, it became relevant.
Mm-hmm. And I think you saw that too, because who knows that better than anybody is ownership. And you saw some members of ownership watching practice right before the Ducks game, right? I mean, just their presence there, watching everything and kind of being around the building. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, no, it does. And I'm still curious to see if the attitudes of the team towards fan outreach maybe change next year and during the off season too. Like that could be something, because again, for the first time, you have to. People didn't show up. Yeah. It's the first time you ever had to deal with this problem. I still think that's something that the team's got to figure out and have a plan for.
Didn't mention it a ton in the post games, but like the building has been fairly empty the last few home games. Like, there's definitely a lot of empty seats there. And I know one of them was the Dallas game that coincided with Mariners opening night. And so, of course, that's gonna have an effect. But still, you'd like to see a more full building.
Yeah. So I still think some of those concerns are there. And just overall with the team, I mean, look, probably going to lose more games than they win the rest of the way. And I don't know that any of us should be surprised by that.
Yeah. And especially with so many of them on the road too. I'm looking forward a bit. I'm really curious how that last road trip is going to go, at Dallas, at St. Louis, at Winnipeg, at Minnesota, when you have no home games left.
Yeah. Well, and I just clicked away from it, but it's to start that road trip, right? It's back-to-back days, right? Of Dallas, St. Louis.
That's rough under normal circumstances.
Yeah, that's going to be especially brutal. So hopes aren't too high for that stuff, but hopes are high for Shane Wright. I want you to be right, RJ. I've totally go on the record with that. I hope you're right. I just prove me wrong, Shane. Prove me wrong. That's what I can say. Either way, we're all super excited to see Shane Wright, see the continuation of the kid line, get some games in against a Sharks and Ducks team again that aren't necessarily that great, and hopefully that helps. And there's still plenty of positives to look forward to for this team. Want to thank everybody for listening. Want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring the podcast like they always do. We'll get you the burger of the month next week, because the keg hunt was definitely worth talking about. Oh yeah, that's a fun thing for sure. And we will see everybody next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Absurdly Sane, Alaska Joe, Alex, Alvi, Andrew, Andri, Anonymous, Anthony, Becca, Beef, Ben, Brad, Bryce, Burnt Creme, Caden, Kat, Kaylin, Chandler, Charles, Shazzle Dazzle, Chip, Chris, Christian, Clutch, Cody, Connor, Coop, Corey, Cutter, Dan, Danny39, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Evie99, Eli, Elizabeth, Empty Net Hockey, Ethan, Evan, Fusion Mix, Gaby, Gabrielle, Gary, Gregory, Helena, Habak, Jane, Jenna, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Julia, Justin, Katie, Kepler, Kevin, Kitty B. Kraken, Cole,
L. Bell, Leanne, Levin, Light, Little Tennis Guy 8, Lonnie, Mac and Cheese, Maeve, Mark, Max, Maya, Michael, Michelle, Nick, Night Drop, Noah, Nunya, Olivia, Paige, Patty, Paul, Rayanne, Randall, Rebecca, Robert, Rocklicker, Ryan, Sarah, Scott, Sia Kraken, Sean, Sergey, Sergeant Pickles, Shannon, Skeletal Tendency, Steven, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Team 114 Chris, Ty, Virginia, Wendy, Where the Slovakians At, and Zoe. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.